Very soon we'll be having IRF research presentation on consumer insights by Shonali Ghosh, Executive Director, Consumer Insights, Nielsen. We'll be starting the presentation very soon. Everyone is requested to kindly settle down for that.
So it's my pleasure today to come and talk to you and give you a few highlights from a syndicated report that we are going to be releasing next month. It's called Shopper Trends. Now, Shopper Trends, as many of you might know, is one of our global products. We run this study across more than 75 countries in the world, and we have been running it in India for the last 10 years. It essentially is a study among grocery buyers across a large demography. And what we are going to do today is essentially look at some of the data across the last 5 years and talk about some of the trends that we see emerging. To set the context, we know the size of the FMCG market. It is about 370,000 crores. And modern retail accounts for about 10% of that. In terms of growth rates, traditional trade is growing at about 11%. Modern trade is growing at a practically double the rate at about 21%, though today it accounts for 10%. Now, if we look at some of the numbers, on the left-hand side is our traditional trade, which, if you see, has a CAGR of about 3% on a very large base of 9.9 million. Okay? Modern trade is much smaller. In 2017, it was about 15,000 odd stores, and it's growing at a fairly clipping pace of about 15%. In the last 1 year, we've added about 2,500 stores. Okay? If you look at, zoom out a little bit from grocery, if you look at online, online shoppers have actually doubled in the last 3 years, from 20 million to 40 million. When we look at some of the data from our smartphone panel, what we see is that in September 14, 1/3 of the panel had a shopping app. In July 2018, it's practically tripled. Okay. Grocery apps, however, have a way to go. It's currently at about 8%. Okay. So overall, the point that we are making is that overall, it is a growth story. Okay. Now, looking at the macro environment, what we have is that we see inflation under control. Income and expenditure is growing together in tandem. And more importantly, consumer sentiment feels that it's more stable. So prices today are more stable than it was, say, about 5 years back. So overall, what has happened is that all of this has resulting in what we call a consumption mindset. So if you look at this, so it is essentially people are more likely to say that I will buy in bulk to get lower prices. They're less likely to trade off between essentials and luxuries. They have overtly, less likely to say that I'm going to cut down on my consumption. And they're also less focused only on discounts, which is something, with interesting point that we heard in the last session. So how has this consumption mindset actually translated into behavior? In 2014, about 40% of people shoppers had visited a modern trade outlet, okay, in the last 1 month. Today, that number is 75%. in 2014, on an average, a shopper would have visited one type of outlet in the last 4 weeks. Today, they're more likely to visit at least 2 types of outlet. It could be a hyper, super, or a traditional trade. So what is traditional trade doing here? Therefore, traditional trade now is locking in shoppers with offer of convenience, doorstep delivery, and credit facility. So they're also upping their game. Okay? So in this interaction, is the shopper clear why they're visiting a modern trade versus a general trade? If you look at it, of all those folks who have visited a modern trade in the last 4 weeks, about close to 50% are saying that I'm really doing my big monthly grocery shopping. And about 40% of those who visited a traditional trade are essentially saying that I'm using it for topping up. So somewhere in the consumer's mind, the missions or the reasons why they visit each of these channels are somewhere coalescing, and they are clear as to when do they visit what. Okay? So what we see is more choices, okay? Thousands of touch points, complexity in shopping behavior in terms of how they search and how they buy products, where they choose to buy products, and the influencers. Okay? So the shopper journey is becoming more complex. And therefore, the role that the store plays in this becomes even more critical. In the work that we've done, we've seen that about 56% of category purchases are pre-planned, even for impulse category. However, at the point of purchase, 55% of decisions in respect of either brand or in terms of category are actually made in the store. Okay? So the role the store can play is really critical. I wanted to bring in another point over here, which is about private label and store brand perceptions. This we see is strengthening. Okay? And this is really interesting. About 80% of those who are buying private labels are essentially saying that the product is either better or of similar quality as regular brands, and also from when I uptrade from unbranded or commodities. And about 40% are saying that this is also reasonably priced. So this is really a big opportunity and ground for private labels. So at this juncture, when we see many choices, complex shopper journey, private labels are coming on their own, there are more buyers, more consumption, it will become increasingly more difficult for a store to essentially build on their loyalist base. And one of the elements that we look at in shopper trends is essentially about understanding what is the store equity or loyalty that the shopper has for these brands. And we do this across about 12 to 15 of them. Okay? So when we wanted to understand is that what is driving store equity or loyalty, what we see is that, interestingly, 60% of it is about the perceptions or the imagery that the shopper has about the store. And this is based on what they have heard or read about it. It is also based on their experiences. Okay? And what is it? What are these perceptions or imagery that makes a difference? When we look at store choice drivers, why would you choose to be in a particular, patronize a particular store and not others? We expect to see the top first two, convenience and experience. This is expected. But what we've seen for the first time coming in is essentially about choices. Private labels are emerging as a store driver. Secondly, what we also see is the available of fresh foods is also emerging as a driver. Okay. And the last important driver is essentially the shopper is asking that what is it in it for me? What is the payback if I patronize you? So what we see over here is that, and we believe that reward programs and loyalty programs are going to be increasingly important. What about promotions? When we look at promotions, we actually see that promotions are less likely to be a store choice driver, but it will continue to be important that once a shopper comes into a store, that promotions could help switch, make us in respect of brand choices. Okay? So to sum up, what is in it for the retailer? What the retailer really needs to focus on is the total shopping experience. Okay? And we believe that increasingly shoppertainment is going to be important, in respect of testing, tasting, something that can engage the shopper more deeply. Okay? Private labels we have called up are here to stay and likely to grow, as well as loyalty schemes. What about the manufacturer? Manufacturer, it is all about relevant promotion. We have seen that brand choices are made at the store in a large case. Clutter breaking becomes very, very important because there are thousands and thousands of choices. And premiumization is an opportunity to premiumize because the consumer is not so much as going to trade off between essentials and luxuries. So if you want to understand a little more about how it plays out in your sector and your business, we would be happy to talk to you. We are in C1 and talk more about shopper trends. And I would also like to remind you that we have Gabbar, whom you met yesterday, is going to come back between 2 and 2:15. So please make sure that you're here then. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you. Questions? Okay. We can take the questions later. Yes.
Could you expand a little bit more on the relevance of private label?
So these are essentially your store brands. So you would have a Reliance brand or any of those, branded package. Say, for example, even Fresco would be considered as a store brand or a private label brand.
Sure, but why are you seeing a growing trend in people making a choice in the private label versus a branded product that's been in the market or on the shelf? So somebody picking a Big Bazaar created product versus a long-standing Britannia or the others. Is there some insight as to why the shift is happening?
Okay. Yes. So the shift is happening in two ways. One is that people are up-trading from their regular, say, their staples that they were buying from, say, their kirana. That is one up-trading that is happening from commodity to a brand. That's the first step, really. But more importantly, what we see is that people feel that they're what we said, they are actually better quality, or at least as good a quality as other brands, as regular brands, and also they are more reasonably priced. So both quality and price are drivers. Yeah? Any others? Thank you. We'll be happy to talk to you at C1. Thanks.